The distant rumble of thunder matched the pounding of Georgina Blake's heart as she pressed the stolen horse harder, glancing over her shoulder at the darkening horizon behind her. She hadn't intended to become a horse thief, but desperation had a way of turning even the most honest souls into criminals. 3 days without food, a warrant for her arrest based on lies, and nowhere to call home had forced her hand. Now, as she rode toward the silhouette of Gold Hill, Wyoming, visible against the amber sunset of 1878, she prayed for sanctuary in a town where no one knew her name or the bounty on her head. The first fat raindrops began to fall as Georgina guided the exhausted mare down the main street of Gold Hill. The town wasn't much to look at: a dusty thoroughfare lined with weathered buildings, a saloon with piano music spilling through its swinging doors, and a general store with its lanterns already lit against the coming storm. But to Georgina, it represented something she hadn't felt in years: possibility. She dismounted in front of the livery stable, her legs wobbly after the long ride. Her threadbare dress was soaked through, clinging to her thin frame. At 22, Georgina had the weathered look of someone who had lived twice as many years. Her auburn hair hung in wet strands around her face as she led the horse into the shelter of the stable. "That's a mighty fine animal you've got there," came a deep voice from the shadows. Georgina startled, her hand automatically reaching for the small knife hidden in her boot. A tall figure stepped forward, and she found herself looking up into the stern face of a man who appeared to be in his early 40s. His hair, the color of wheat with threads of silver at the temples, was partially hidden beneath a worn Stetson. His eyes, sharp and assessing, seemed to look straight through her hastily constructed defenses. "The horse isn't stolen, if that's what you're suggesting," she lied, her chin lifting defiantly despite the fear churning in her stomach. The man's eyes narrowed. "Didn't say it was." "But that's Jackson Whitmore's branding on her flank, and last I checked, Jackson doesn't lend out his horses to strangers." He crossed his arms over his broad chest. "I'm Tyler Ross, and I don't take kindly to horse thieves in Gold Hill." "I'm not a thief," Georgina insisted, even as her knees threatened to buckle beneath her. How many days had it been since she'd eaten properly? The room began to spin, black spots dancing before her eyes. Tyler Ross's expression shifted from suspicion to concern as he watched the color drain from the young woman's face. He lunged forward just as her legs gave out, catching her before she hit the straw-covered floor. Miss. He patted her cheek gently, feeling the alarming heat of fever beneath his fingers. When Georgina regained consciousness, she was lying on a soft bed in an unfamiliar room. The rain pattered against a window, and a fire crackled in a stone hearth. She tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness forced her back against the pillows. "I wouldn't move too quickly if I were you," said a female voice. Georgina turned her head to see an elderly woman sitting in a rocking chair nearby, knitting needles clicking rhythmically in her gnarled hands. "Where am I?" Georgina asked, her voice hoarse. "You're at the Ross Ranch, about 3 miles outside of Gold Hill. I'm Martha, Tyler's housekeeper." The old woman set aside her knitting and approached the bed. "Tyler brought you here after you fainted in the stable. You've been out for nearly a day, burning with fever. The horse is being taken care of, though Tyler's sent word to Jackson Whitmore about his missing mare." Martha's eyes were kind but knowing. "Whatever trouble you're running from, child, it seems to have caught up with you." Tears welled in Georgina's eyes. "I had no choice." "There's always a choice," came Tyler's voice from the doorway. He entered the room carrying a tray with a steaming bowl of stew. "But right now, you need to eat. We can discuss your situation after you've regained some strength." Georgina accepted the tray with shaking hands, the aroma of the stew making her stomach growl audibly. She hadn't realized how ravenous she was until the first spoonful touched her lips. As she ate, she became acutely aware of Tyler's presence, his watchful gaze making her nervous. "Thank you," she said quietly after finishing the meal. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," Tyler replied bluntly. "But my sons and I have an agreement with the good Lord. We help those in need and ask questions later." He took the empty tray from her. "Speaking of my boys, they'll be back from town soon. I should warn you, they're a handful." As if on cue, the sound of thundering hooves and raucous laughter filtered through the window. Tyler sighed, a mixture of exasperation and fondness crossing his weathered features. "Those wild boys need a firmer hand than I've given them since their mother died," he muttered, more to himself than to Georgina. Then, louder, "Rest now. We'll talk in the morning." After Tyler and Martha left the room, Georgina lay back against the pillows, listening to the commotion downstairs. Male voices, young and boisterous, argued and joked with each other. A crash followed by Tyler's stern reprimand made her flinch. This family dynamic was foreign to her. She'd grown up in an orphanage in Boston until she was 16, then worked as a maid in a series of increasingly disreputable households before fleeing west to escape false accusations of theft from her last employer. Sleep claimed her again, and when Georgina next opened her eyes, pale morning light was filtering through the curtains. Her fever had broken, leaving her weak but clear-headed. She sat up gingerly and noticed clean clothes laid out at the foot of the bed, a simple dress that had been taken in and mended in several places. After dressing, Georgina made her way downstairs, following the smell of coffee and the sound of voices. She paused in the doorway of the kitchen, taking in the scene before her. Tyler sat at the head of a large table, a newspaper open before him. Around him sat 3 young men, all bearing a striking resemblance to their father, though each distinct in his own way. "Well, look who's finally awake," said the oldest-looking of the 3, a young man with the same wheat-colored hair as his father but with eyes that held a dangerous glint. "Pa told us he brought home a half-dead horse thief, but he didn't mention she was pretty." "James," Tyler warned without looking up from his paper. The youngest boy, who couldn't be more than 18, grinned widely. "I'm Matthew, that's James, and the quiet one's Luke." He gestured to the middle brother, who was methodically cutting his bacon into precise pieces. "Are you really a horse thief, Matthew?" Tyler folded his paper with a snap. "That's enough. Miss," he looked at Georgina expectantly. "Blake," she supplied softly. "Georgina Blake. Miss Blake is our guest until she recovers her strength. You'll treat her with respect." The brothers exchanged glances, and Georgina could read the skepticism in their expressions. She didn't blame them. She was a stranger, and one who'd arrived under suspicious circumstances. "Come sit," Martha said, pulling out a chair. "These boys might be lacking in manners, but they won't bite." "Speak for yourself," James muttered, earning another sharp look from his father. Georgina took the offered seat, acutely aware of the 4 pairs of eyes studying her. Martha placed a plate of eggs and bacon before her, and despite her embarrassment, Georgina's hunger won out. She ate quickly, keeping her gaze fixed on her plate. "So, Miss Blake," Tyler said finally, his voice measured, "I think it's time you told us your story." Georgina set down her fork, her appetite suddenly gone. "I don't have much of a story worth telling, Mr. Ross." "Everyone has a story," Tyler replied evenly. "And I'd like to hear yours before the sheriff comes calling about that horse." Feeling cornered, Georgina looked around the table at the expectant faces. She took a deep breath and decided that truth, or at least part of it, was her only option. "I was working as a lady's maid in Denver," she began, carefully choosing her words. "My employer accused me of stealing her diamond necklace after it went missing. I didn't take it, but her word counted for more than mine." She twisted her napkin in her lap. "I was facing prison, so I ran. I've been traveling for weeks, doing odd jobs to get by, but they eventually caught up to me in the last town. I was desperate, hungry, and when I saw the horse—" "You stole it," Tyler finished for her. "Yes," Georgina admitted, lifting her chin, "and I'd do it again if it meant surviving. I've learned that in this world, no one looks out for you but yourself." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Luke, who hadn't spoken a word until now, cleared his throat. "That's not entirely true, Miss Blake," he said quietly. "Sometimes strangers can surprise you." Tyler studied Georgina for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Well, horse thieving is a serious offense in these parts, but I believe your story. Jackson Whitmore is an old friend, and I've already spoken to him. He's agreed not to press charges, provided you work to pay for the use of his horse." Relief washed over Georgina. "I'll work. I'm not afraid of hard labor." "Good," Tyler nodded. Because Martha could use help around the house, and these boys need someone to keep them in line when I'm working the ranch. What? James exclaimed, his chair scraping back as he stood. Pa, you can't be serious. We don't need a sit down. Tyler's voice cracked like a whip. You boys have been running wild since your mother died, and it's past time someone brought some order to this house. Miss Blake needs a place to stay, and we need help. It's a fair arrangement. I don't need anyone telling me what to do, James growled. That's exactly your problem, Tyler retorted. You think you're grown, but you're still acting like a child, all three of you. He looked at each of his sons in turn. This isn't up for discussion. Miss Blake stays, and you'll treat her with respect. The tension in the room was palpable. Matthew looked between his father and older brother, while Luke kept his eyes fixed on his plate. Finally, James pushed back from the table and stalked out of the room, the door slamming behind him. I apologize for my son's behavior, Tyler said to Georgina. James took his mother's death the hardest, and he's been fighting me on everything since. I understand, Georgina replied softly, though in truth she didn't. Family dynamics were as foreign to her as the Wyoming wilderness. I don't want to cause problems. You're not causing problems, Tyler assured her. My boys are experts at doing that all on their own. He rose from the table. Martha will show you what needs doing. I've got to check the north pasture fence before the storm hits. After Tyler left, Martha gave Georgina a sympathetic look. Don't mind James. He'll come around. They all will, once they get used to having a woman in the house again. The following days established a routine that was both strange and comforting to Georgina. She rose early to help Martha prepare breakfast, cleaned the house, mended clothes, and learned the rhythms of ranch life. The Ross brothers continued to regard her with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Matthew, the youngest at 18, was the most accepting. His sunny disposition was at odds with his penchant for mischief, but he happily chatted with Georgina as she worked, telling her stories about the ranch and town. Luke, 21 and studious, was polite but reserved. He spent much of his time with ledgers and books, managing the ranch's finances with a precision that impressed Georgina. James, at 23, remained hostile. He avoided the house when Georgina was inside and barely acknowledged her presence when their paths crossed. His defiance extended to his father as well, often returning late from town smelling of whiskey and cheap perfume. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after Georgina's arrival, she was in the kitchen preparing supper when she heard shouting from the yard. She rushed to the window to see Tyler and James facing off, their postures rigid with anger. You can't keep doing this, James, Tyler shouted. Fighting in town, drinking away your wages, disrespecting me and everyone else. I'm a grown man, James yelled back. I don't need you or that woman you brought in telling me how to live my life. That woman has a name, and she's shown more maturity in 2 weeks than you have in years. Tyler's face was flushed with anger. Your mother would be ashamed of how you're acting. It was the wrong thing to say. James lunged forward, his fist connecting with his father's jaw. Tyler staggered backward, shock written across his face. For a terrible moment, everyone froze. Tyler in the yard, James with his fist still raised, and Luke and Matthew who had rushed outside at the commotion. Then James turned and strode to the stables. Minutes later, he galloped away on his horse, not looking back. Georgina retreated from the window, her heart racing. This was her fault. She disrupted the precarious balance of this family, and now it was fracturing before her eyes. When Tyler came inside, the left side of his face was already swelling. Georgina wordlessly handed him a cloth filled with ice from the icebox. He accepted it with a nod, pressing it against his jaw. I'm sorry, Georgina said softly. Perhaps it would be better if I left. Tyler shook his head. This isn't about you, not really. James has been headed for trouble long before you arrived. He sighed heavily. He's so much like his mother, passionate, stubborn, quick to anger, but just as quick to love. He hasn't learned to channel that fire the way she did. Something in Tyler's voice when he spoke of his late wife made Georgina's heart ache. You loved her very much. More than life, Tyler admitted. When Sarah died in childbirth 6 years ago, she and the baby both it nearly destroyed me. I wasn't there for my boys the way I should have been. By the time I pulled myself together, they'd grown used to raising themselves. The vulnerability in his confession surprised Georgina. In the short time she'd known Tyler Ross, he'd seemed unshakable, stern but fair, capable and confident. This glimpse of his pain humanized him in a way that made her see him differently. "It's not too late," she said gently. "They're still young men finding their way." Tyler looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. "You're wise for someone so young, Georgina Blake." The use of her first name sent an unexpected warmth through her. "Not wise," she replied. "Just someone who's seen enough of life to know that family is precious, even when it's difficult, especially then." Tyler's eyes held hers for a long moment. "James will come back when he's cooled off." "He always does." But James didn't return that night, nor the next. Tyler tried to hide his worry, but Georgina could see it in the way he scanned the horizon whenever he stepped outside, in how he tensed at the sound of approaching horses. On the third day, Luke rode into town to ask about his brother. He returned with troubling news. James had gotten into another fight at the saloon, this time with a notorious gunslinger passing through. The gunslinger had challenged James to a duel the following day. "This is madness," Tyler said, pacing the living room after hearing Luke's report. "James is fast, but he's not a killer, and this Blackwell character has 5 notches on his gun." "We have to stop him, Pa," Matthew urged, his usual carefree demeanor replaced by genuine fear. "I'll ride to town first thing in the morning," Tyler decided. "Try to talk some sense into your brother's thick skull." That night, Georgina couldn't sleep. The thought of James facing a killer over some foolish saloon argument made her stomach churn. She'd seen enough death in her short life to know its finality, its waste. And despite James's hostility toward her, she'd come to care about the entire Ross family in ways she hadn't expected. Making a decision, Georgina dressed quietly and slipped out of the house. The stable was dark, but she'd watched the ranch hands enough to know how to saddle a horse. She chose a gentle mare, whispering apologies for disturbing its sleep, and rode toward Gold Hill under a canopy of stars. The town was mostly dark when she arrived, save for the saloon where light and noise spilled onto the street. Georgina tied her horse and straightened her shoulders before pushing through the swinging doors. The room fell silent as heads turned toward her. Women were rare enough in Gold Hill, but respectable women in the saloon at night were unheard of. Georgina ignored the stares, scanning the room until she spotted James at a corner table, a bottle of whiskey before him. She marched over, uncomfortably aware of the eyes following her progress. James looked up, his expression shifting from surprise to anger as he recognized her. "What the hell are you doing here?" he hissed. "Stopping you from getting yourself killed," Georgina replied, pulling out a chair and sitting across from him. "Your family is worried sick," James snorted. "Did Pa send you to fetch me home? I'm not a child." "No, he didn't. He doesn't know I'm here." Georgina leaned forward. "And you're right, you're not a child, so stop acting like one." James's eyes widened in shock, then narrowed dangerously. "You don't know anything about me or my family. You're just some thief my father felt sorry for." The words stung, but Georgina refused to show it. "I know enough. I know your father loves you more than you realize. I know your brothers look up to you, even when you're being a fool. And I know that if you go through with this duel tomorrow, you'll either die or become something you never wanted to be." "What would you know about what I want?" James challenged, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "I know that you're angry because your mother died and left you," Georgina said softly. "I know that you're afraid of caring about anyone because they might leave too. I know because I've felt the same way." James stared at her, his whiskey forgotten. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Georgina countered. "I was abandoned as a baby. I grew up in an orphanage where no one cared if I lived or died. Every person I've ever trusted has betrayed me or left me behind." She swallowed hard. "Except your family. Your father took me in when he could have sent me to jail. Your brothers, even you in your own way, have shown me what family could be. Don't throw that away over pride." For a long moment, James was silent, his face a battlefield of emotions. Finally, he said, "It's too late. I can't back out of the duel without being branded a coward." "There are worse things than being called a coward," Georgina replied, "like making your father bury his son." The words hung in the air between them. James closed his eyes briefly, then drained his glass. "I'll think about it," he said finally, which wasn't the answer Georgina had hoped for but was better than outright refusal. "That's all I ask," she said, rising from her chair. "I should get back before anyone notices I'm gone." James caught her wrist as she turned to leave. "Why do you care what happens to me? I've been nothing but cruel to you." Georgina looked down at his hand on her wrist, then met his gaze steadily. "Because everyone deserves someone who cares whether they live or die, even stubborn cowboys with more temper than sense." A ghost of a smile touched James's lips. "Ride carefully. There are coyotes out there." "I suspect they're less dangerous than what I just faced in here," she replied with a small smile of her own before turning to leave. The ride back to the ranch was tense, Georgina's mind filled with worries about James and the coming dawn. She stabled the horse as quietly as possible and crept back to her room, but as she reached the porch, a voice from the darkness made her jump. Midnight rides are dangerous for a woman alone. Tyler stepped out of the shadows, his expression unreadable in the moonlight. Georgina's heart sank. She'd been caught. "I had something important to do," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "Something like trying to talk sense into my hard-headed son," Tyler asked, surprising her. "How did you?" "I know when someone leaves my property, Georgina." Tyler moved closer. "What I don't know is why you'd risk yourself for a young man who's done nothing but resent your presence." Georgina met his gaze steadily. "Because he's your son, because he matters to you, and because—" She hesitated. "Because in the short time I've been here, all of you have come to matter to me." Something shifted in Tyler's expression, a softening around his eyes. "And you matter to us, more than you might realize." He rubbed a hand over his face. "Did James listen to you?" "I don't know," Georgina admitted. "He said he'd think about it." "That's more than he's given me lately," Tyler sighed. "Come inside. There's no use in both of us losing sleep tonight." The next morning, Tyler rode into town at first light, instructing Luke and Matthew to stay at the ranch with Georgina. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching like taffy as they waited for news. Georgina tried to keep busy with chores, but her hands shook too much for fine work. It was nearly noon when they heard horses approaching. All three rushed to the porch, squinting against the bright sunlight. Two riders appeared on the horizon, and as they drew closer, Georgina's heart leaped with recognition. Tyler and James, both alive and seemingly whole. Matthew whooped with joy, and even Luke's stoic facade cracked with a broad smile. Georgina hung back, relief making her knees weak. The men dismounted, and there was a moment of awkward tension before James stepped forward and embraced his father. Over Tyler's shoulder, his eyes met Georgina's, and he gave a small nod of acknowledgement. Later, as Martha prepared a celebratory dinner, James found Georgina alone in the kitchen garden, picking herbs. "You were right," he said without preamble. "I was being a fool." Georgina looked up, shading her eyes against the sun. "What happened with the gunslinger?" "Pa paid him off," James admitted, a flush coloring his cheeks. "Said it was worth every cent to keep me from making the biggest mistake of my life." He scuffed his boot in the dirt. "I didn't deserve that." "Of course you did," Georgina replied. "You're his son." "I haven't acted much like it lately." James met her gaze directly. "Thank you for coming to the saloon last night. What you said, it made me think," Georgina smiled. "I'm glad. Your family needs you, James." "They need you too," he said quietly. "I've been too stubborn to admit it, but this place has been different since you arrived. Better." It was the closest thing to acceptance James had offered, and Georgina treasured it. "Thank you. That means a great deal to me." From that day forward, the atmosphere at the Ross Ranch shifted subtly. James's hostility melted into cautious acceptance, and eventually, genuine friendship. Luke began seeking Georgina's help with correspondence, impressed by her neat handwriting and articulate phrasing skills she'd acquired during her years in service. Matthew followed her around like an eager puppy, soaking up the attention and guidance she provided. And Tyler. Tyler watched it all with an expression Georgina couldn't quite decipher. Sometimes she would look up to find his eyes on her, only for him to quickly look away. Their conversations grew longer, deeper, touching on hopes and dreams, the pain of the past and tentative thoughts of the future. Summer faded into autumn, bringing with it the cattle roundup and a flurry of activity around the ranch. Georgina found herself increasingly indispensable, not just in the house but in the operation of the ranch itself. She kept the ledgers with Luke, helped plan supplies for the winter, and even learned to ride properly, accompanying Tyler on shorter journeys around the property. It was during one such ride, on a crisp October afternoon, that Tyler finally spoke of what had been growing between them. "Winter's coming," he said as they paused atop a ridge overlooking the valley where the Ross Ranch sprawled below them. "You've more than paid off your debt for that horse." Georgina's heart stuttered in her chest. "Are you asking me to leave?" "No," Tyler said quickly, turning to face her. "I'm asking what you want, Georgina. You came to us running from something. I need to know if you're still running or if you found something worth staying for." The wind caught Georgina's hair, lifting it from her shoulders as she considered her answer. The arrest warrant was likely still active in Denver, but it seemed a lifetime away now. Here, in this wild, beautiful country, with these people who had become more family to her than anyone she'd ever known, she'd found something she hadn't dared hope for. "I've found more than I ever dreamed possible," she said honestly. "Your family has become everything to me." Tyler's expression softened. "And you've become everything to us, to me." He reached across the space between their horses, his calloused hand taking hers. "I know I'm older than you, not so very much," Georgina interrupted with a small smile. "Enough to make me hesitate," Tyler countered. "You deserve a young man a fresh start." "I've had enough fresh starts," Georgina replied firmly. "What I want is roots, Tyler, a home, a family." She squeezed his hand. The vulnerability in his eyes nearly undid her. "I've been alone for a long time," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure I'd ever feel this way again." "Neither was I," Georgina admitted. "I wasn't looking for this, but here we are." "Here we are," Tyler echoed, his gaze holding hers. "I love you, Georgina Blake. I think I have since the moment you stood in my kitchen and refused to be intimidated by my wild sons." Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and effervescent. "I love you too. Your strength, your kindness, the way you love your sons even when they drive you to distraction." Tyler leaned across the space between them, his hand coming up to cup her cheek as he kissed her gently at first, then with increasing urgency as she responded. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, their horses shifting impatiently beneath them. "Marry me," Tyler said, the words more command than question. "Be my wife, a mother to my sons, the heart of our home." "Yes," Georgina answered without hesitation. "Yes to all of it." The news of their engagement was met with varying reactions from the Ross brothers. Matthew was enthusiastically supportive, immediately addressing Georgina as Ma, despite her blushing protests. Luke offered quiet congratulations, though his eyes held genuine warmth when he told Georgina he was pleased to welcome her officially to the family. James's reaction was more complicated. He pulled Georgina aside the evening after the announcement, his expression serious. "Do you love him?" He asked bluntly. "Really love him, because he hasn't been the same since my mother died and I won't watch him get hurt again." "I love him with all my heart," Georgina assured him. "I know I can never replace your mother, James. I wouldn't try to. But I promise you, I will spend every day trying to be worthy of your father's love and your family's trust." James studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "That's good enough for me." He offered his hand. "Welcome to the family, Georgina." The wedding took place in November, a small ceremony in the town church with the residents of Gold Hill in attendance. Jackson Whitmore, whose horse Georgina had stolen months ago, gave her away with a twinkle in his eye and a whispered, "Best theft I ever suffered." As winter settled over the valley, the Ross Ranch settled into a new rhythm. Georgina and Tyler moved into the main bedroom, while the three brothers maintained their rooms in the other wing of the house. Nights were filled with reading by the fire, Luke teaching Georgina to play chess, Matthew regaling them with town gossip, and even James joining in for card games and conversation. It wasn't perfect. James still had a temper, Matthew still found trouble wherever he went, and Luke still retreated into books when emotions ran high. But it was family, messy and real and more precious to Georgina than anything she'd ever known. The greatest challenge came in February, when a blizzard swept down from the mountains without warning. Tyler and James were caught checking on the winter herd, forced to shelter in a lined shack until the storm passed. For 3 days, Georgina paced the house, her worry mounting with each hour. They know what they're doing, Luke assured her, though his own concern was evident in the dark circles under his eyes. Pa's weathered worse storms than this. They'll be back cursing the cold and demanding hot coffee before you know it, Matthew added, trying to keep their spirits up. On the 4th day, just as Georgina was preparing to organize a search party despite the treacherous conditions, the sound of horses in the yard sent them all rushing to the door. Tyler and James dismounted slowly, their movements stiff with cold, their beards crusted with ice. Georgina flung herself at Tyler, tears freezing on her cheeks as she embraced him. "I thought I'd lost you," she whispered against his chest. "Never," he promised, his voice hoarse. "I have too much to live for to let a little snow defeat me." That night, after hot baths and a hearty meal, Tyler found Georgina in their bedroom, staring out the window at the snow-covered landscape. "What are you thinking about, wife?" he asked, coming to stand behind her, his arms encircling her waist. "How quickly everything can change," she replied, leaning back against him. "A year ago I was alone, running for my life. Now I have everything I never dared dream of." Tyler turned her in his arms to face him. "I have something to tell you," he said, his expression serious. Georgina's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" While we were trapped in that line shack, James and I had a lot of time to talk, really talk for the first time in years. Tyler's eyes held a quiet wonder. "He told me that you were the one who went to the saloon that night, that your words were what made him reconsider the duel." Georgina dropped her gaze. "I should have told you." "No," Tyler said, lifting her chin with his finger. "You did what you thought was right, and you were correct." "I'm just grateful." He kissed her gently. "My son said something else, something that made me realize just how much you've changed all our lives." "What was that?" Georgina asked. "He said that you taught him what his mother always tried to show us, that strength isn't about never showing weakness, but about finding the courage to be vulnerable with those you love." Tyler's voice thickened with emotion. "You've healed this family, Georgina. You've healed me." Tears filled her eyes. "You've given me the only thing I've ever wanted: belonging, a home, a family." "And now our family will grow," Tyler said, his hand moving to rest gently against her stomach. "I've seen the signs, wife. Martha confirmed my suspicions this morning." Georgina gasped, her hands flying to cover his. "A baby, you're sure?" Tyler nodded, his smile widening. "It seems our wedding night was particularly blessed. Joy unlike anything Georgina had ever known flooded through her, their child growing inside her. The ultimate proof that she was no longer alone, that she had found her place in the world. The boys," she asked, suddenly anxious. "How will they feel about this?" "They'll be thrilled," Tyler assured her. "Matthew's already asking when he'll be an uncle, though I suspect he doesn't realize how it usually happens." He chuckled. "Luke will probably start researching child-rearing methods, and James," he paused, "James will protect this child with his life, just as he does everyone he loves." They told the brothers the next morning over breakfast. Matthew whooped with excitement, Luke offered thoughtful congratulations, and James surprised them all by kneeling before Georgina's chair and placing a gentle hand on her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one," he said softly. "I'm your big brother, and I promise you'll never lack for love or protection as long as I'm around." The baby was born the following August, a healthy boy with his father's wheat-colored hair and his mother's determined chin. They named him Thomas, and from the moment he drew his first breath, he was surrounded by love. The Ross brothers took to unclehood with varying approaches but equal devotion. Matthew played endless games, making the baby giggle with silly faces and sounds. Luke read to him for hours, convinced that early exposure to literature was essential for proper development. And James, to everyone's surprise, revealed a gentle patience no one had suspected, often volunteering for middle-of-the-night feedings so Georgina could rest. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the change in the Ross family became even more pronounced. The wild, undisciplined household Georgina had first encountered was transformed. The brothers still had their moments of recklessness, but there was a new sense of responsibility, a shared commitment to creating the stable, loving environment they'd lacked after their mother's death. 2 years after Thomas's birth, Georgina gave birth to twins, a boy and a girl they named William and Sarah, the latter in honor of Tyler's first wife. The Ross Ranch expanded to accommodate the growing family, adding rooms to the main house and hiring additional hands to manage the increasing prosperity of their cattle operation. On a warm summer evening 5 years after Georgina had first stumbled into Gold Hill on a stolen horse, she sat on the porch swing watching her husband play with their children in the yard. Thomas, now nearly 5, was attempting to rope a wooden post under James's patient instruction. The twins, almost 3, were squealing with delight as Tyler lifted them onto his shoulders. Luke settled beside Georgina on the swing, handing her a glass of lemonade. Quite a sight, isn't it? Almost hard to remember how it used to be around here. Wild sons and a desperate thief. Georgina suggested with a smile. A broken family and a woman who needed one, Luke corrected gently. I think you and Pa saved each other. Georgina watched as Matthew joined the group in the yard, initiating an impromptu game of tag that soon had everyone, including James, laughing and breathless. We all saved each other, she said softly. That's what families do. As the sun began to set over the Wyoming Valley, casting long shadows across the land that had become her home, Georgina Ross reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From abandoned orphan to accused thief to beloved wife, mother, and sister, each step, even the desperate ones, had led her to this place of belonging. Tyler looked up and caught her eye across the yard. The love in his gaze, steady and unwavering after all these years, still made her heart skip. He said something to James, then crossed to the porch, taking her hand and pulling her to her feet. Dance with me, he said, drawing her into his arms as Luke began to play a soft melody on the harmonica he always carried. Here, now, Georgina laughed as Tyler began to sway with her. Here and now, he confirmed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And tomorrow and every day after that for the rest of our lives. As they danced in the fading light, their children watching with delight and the Ross brothers looking on with approval, Georgina knew with absolute certainty that she had found what she'd always searched for. Not just a family she'd never had, but one she'd helped create through love, patience, and the courage to believe in second chances. The Wild sons had found their discipline, and she had found her home. Together, they had built something that would endure long after the sun set on their time in this valley, a legacy of love that would carry forward through generations of the Ross family. And for a woman who had once had nothing, that was everything.